Okay, it's 9:30, so we'll make a start. Tēnā koutou katoa. I declare the council meeting CL 23/3 open and welcome you all here. A big crowd and welcome you all. I would like to ask Te Kia Toma to open with a karakia, please.
Ora kia ino tata. Whai kroti aho ne rei hare rui a i ho ngomono matua tamo ai rua tapu me ngāna pono me te māngai. Tatu ato no ka koutou nā tuakana wairua te arapa te waka peruiri tua hāwera me te māngai. Ko te ino e ati kia tatu mai ana koutou ki wainganui tēnei wakamai mi te o mātou. Hei tatare ngā kupu katoa e wakapua ki nā mātou i mua te koutou warawaro. Nā te meka o te neo ki te tīmatanga me te whakaotinga mai ngā tuanakotanga i whiwhi ai mātou. Ngā hua o roti te hoa tau kororiatanga. Nō reira, kia hau mai piki te ora te kaha te maramatanga me te rangu Māori e tanga. Ki rua kia mātou, i roto i ngā whiriwhiritanga, ngā whitiwhiti kōrero, ngā tau patutanga, ngā tau tohetanga, ngā ahuatanga katoa e pāna ki tēnei huihuinga. Nō reira, piki te ora te kaha te maramatanga kia mātou i ngā wakato. Maona te maanga he awhana, hei tautoko mai, aia nei, haka nei ai. Kia ora tata.
Korori a hareruia, ia iho a o ngā mano, ki te kauri are ki waiwa. Ko te māngai e tautoko mai, te arepa te oreka, tautoko tia mai e ro une.
Reira e te māngai ngāre pono e te tokotori tapa. Uhia i hoto katoa rono ki tuke e nei pono ngā koutou. Mei ngā noa ia ke ki te tamarapatanga o tō koutou rono. Ka whakapono ai tōna whatumana o e tōna wairua. Ko koutou te mauri o ngā mea katoa kia wehi ai kia koe e ihoa. Ki runga te ingoa te matua te tama, te wairua tapu me ngā ānahira pono. Me te māngai te kai tautoko hei awhana, hei tuturu, hei pūmau, aia nei, haka nei ai. Kia ora tata.
Thank you for that. So we'll move on with the meeting. I just would like to note that this meeting is being live streamed and everyone should note the consequences of that. We appear to be all here, so there are no apologies. I'm not aware of any late items. Does anyone have a declaration of interest? No, thank you. There are no public excluded items, so we'll now move to public forum. And first up on the list, I have Mabel Wharekawa-Burt.
You said I was last. Tuatahi tēnā koutou, e te moana waitahe nui tonu. Tēnei te mānga nā roto i Aotearoa, tamawhariua e tūana hei māngai mō tātou. Kia tau ngā manaakitanga ki runga kia hau me ngā kōrero ko puta mai. Me o mate kei wānganui a koutou. Tēnā koutou. Your Worship, tēnā koe and your councillors. Tēnā koe John and all your staff. Firstly, I would like to give some thoughts to the families of Maui and Lahaina going through those tribulations in Hawaii. And I'd like to give you the apologies of Tuapiro Marae, of Sean Kingi, who is at the bedside of his critically ill treated grandmother. So he sends particularly to his very special friends. And I know Tuapiro has worked hard to have a very special and unique relationship with council, but I'm very pleased to be here. At first I had thought that I would listen to everybody else and I would just pick up where it left off. However, I stand here today based on a 14-year experience with the Electoral Commission. When I first started in 1999 with the then Chief Electoral Office, it morphed very quickly into the Electoral Commission because of MMP. And the tribulations that we went through trying to get the country to adjust to MMP seemed to be reflected in Local Body Act, but I was privileged to be party to a lot of the participation and discussions from the Electoral Commission through to the Local Bodies Act of 2001. I was there until 2014 and there were many changes. But one of the things that I saw was the first attempt by my people to look at Māori wards. And I had, coming here, it was a realization that there are many things that we have to deal with. And some of them, I have some stuff here. I'm always comparative. Those of you who have dealt with me, you know I'm comparative. There's stuff here that probably makes the council look as if they've abrogated their responsibilities to somebody else. When I was with the Electoral Commission, though, we were struggling to get the voting numbers up. And I note that the last attempt to have a Māori ward within my people elicited like 48% of the population, which means that 52% didn't seem to have an objection. 48% did, but then 70, almost 80% of that objected to the fact that we constituted a Māori ward. But within the electoral office, when we only had 72% through all the electorates in the country, that wasn't good results, and it wasn't a good representation, and it didn't elicit what I would term to be an accurate reflection of how the community was feeling. And so I consider those statistics to be the same as what we faced in the Chief Electoral Office. And so perhaps I might ask you today if you might look at that. I've already spoken to some of my friends and I know where they positioned. Mine is, my job today is to try to influence you to just open your minds a little bit further, not to change your personal opinions, but to remind us all that Māori, 95% of Māori, we live biculturally. We speak 2 languages. How many people here do? I'm reminded of, how can you, I'm standing here for my grandchildren. How can you say that you know or you are aware of what is best for me unless you have had a Māori in for a cup of tea? I know a lot of these. We've had more than a cup of tea. So unless you've had a cup of tea with someone, how can you purport to know what they're feeling about what is going on? And if in my own background, I want to ask you and implore you again to open your minds that perhaps it's just fear that's driving you because you're not sure. Don't watch the TV or read the media. I'm really not quite bad. And by I'm and you, I'm reflecting the fact that we seem to be in adversarial capacities today. It's an us and them. It's not a position that I'm really proud of, but it exists today. And so the Local Electoral Act actually opens it up for you. Why don't blame the Electoral Act? Just say that it's something and take a chance on me. Why don't you take a chance? It's only for 6 years. 2 electoral terms is all I'm asking you to look at. But the advantages are that you get a full and reflective opinion to base this country on. You could set patterns for the rest of the country. We're way behind. Look at all the surrounding areas who already have Māori wards, and we are so far behind. Just before I came onto the Electoral Commission in 1999, we had Judge Peter Tapsky do a review of what was best for the implementation of MMP and also to introduce input into the local body elections. And his review clearly writes, this is an excellent report. The recommendations in here from my work background are wonderful. And I think they're very, very relationship binding. I'm not scared of them. I've made this comment in the past, and I believe someone may have brought it up, that I've said I wasn't in favor of Māori wards. And I'm still not sure, but I'll tell you why. They didn't tell you the rest of the sentence. I'm not in favor of Māori wards because councils and government, you are renowned for breaking promises. I'm scared for those who back me, who come into it with trust and come and support the things that I want to do, but also those who support my people, because the record is very long of the reneged promises that have been made by councils. I want us to be the one, regardless of whether you like it, you're already showing that you're quite disposed to my people. We've still got karakia. You're still allowing us to do karakia. And I mean, yeah, we would kick up if you didn't, but we're grateful for that fact. And maybe it's just something that's become habit and we're all comfortable with it because we're accustomed to it. So mine, again, is to ask you to have a look at it, that Māori Wards, they're not threatening. They're not threatening. We're bicultural. Some of us are multicultural. I'm married to someone from England, me, with this mouth. I'm married to someone from England, but my husband's parents were in their 70s when my husband and I decided to marry. I went to their house. I was the very first coloured person they had in their home at 70. They were brought up in the East Kenyas and in the colonialist Africa. And so they already had their attitudes. They were allowed to keep their attitudes and I was allowed to keep mine, but we worked very, very hard at it. And to the last day when my mother-in-law died in my arms, surely that is the sort, I don't want you to die in my arms, but I'm just showing you that anything is possible if we just take a chance. We just need to take a chance today. And some of the people at the back of me have all the statistics and all the data to back this up. I'm from Katikati and my people at this time don't have much confidence in my representatives as far as representing us, but I still consider myself to be good friends with them. And we are able to separate that. So my background is this. I can show you that I need to get to the end. I have a degree in music, a degree in social science, and I have a master's in Māori development. I am the holder of a New Zealand Order of Merit. I'm a Justice of Peace. None of those things matter if I can't get you to be influenced by what I say today and the importance and the priority. You are bound and obligated to make good decisions for my grandchildren, and you cannot make them when you don't know them and you don't know me. Come for a cup of tea. It's a bit late now because I'm going to be watching you as you vote today, but you're welcome for a cup of tea. And I'm telling you, if you want to take a chance on me and my people, we will back you. We don't have to like you to back you. We don't have to think the same to protect you and keep you safe, because we will. Oh my God. Yeah, we're bound to keep each other safe. If you support me, I will support you. And that's not a blackmail factor. It's just the fact of life when you're relationship building. I had a lot of stuff that I wanted to say today, but I think I might just put it away and just work on the thing that I'm best at, as in igniting relationship factors where you take a chance on this. But we're not a threat. We're not a threat. And you put the judges there, Judge Peter Tapsky and his lot, you put them there. I didn't put them there. And these are the results of their review, not mine. They tell you. I'm trying to tell you, but maybe you'll listen to your own who tell you that I'm not a threat, that the act is really good for all local body if we can all sit down together. And so that's the promise. I'm here, and I know a lot of my people are here if you care to take a chance on me. Nā reira, tēnei, I am unequivocally supporting the establishment of Māori Wards today, and I ask humbly that you all take a chance on me. If you're swinging, swing my way. Swing my way. I'll make sure that you're safe. And if you're not sure, I'll teach you. I'll take you to the marae and I'll teach you, and all my people will. Nā runga I tērā e oati ki runga I a tātou. Ana kua musi te pahu ki runga ki tēnei. Engari ko tāku e te mautere. Ngā mātua tēnei te mihi kia koutou. Your worship, thank you very much. And Chris, thank you very much for that time in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mabel. I was going to ask if there's any questions that elected members had for Mabel. Does anyone want to ask questions? No, I think you've got off there, Mabel, so thank you very much again. Okay. Next, we have Andy Galyer-Douglas.
Morena tātou, ngā mihi nui katoa. I'm Andy Galyer-Douglas. I'm the Chief Executive of Tapuika Iwi Authority based in Te Puke, which is part of this district. And I'm also the Tapuika Iwi Rep on Te Iho Atuaka, so many of you know me from there, and also the Chair of CoLab Te Puke Makatū, which is a community collective. I'm just here today really just to speak in support of this motion to establish Māori Wards, because I believe it's really important that mana whenua are at the decision-making table. And while we'd like to think that we could stand on our own merits and be successful, the reality is that just doesn't happen. We're still the ethnic minority in our own country. And so without this mechanism, we're going to be silent. We're not going to have our voice heard the way it needs to be heard. There are a lot of good reasons why we should be at the table, and we can add significant value. We were here long before any councils existed. We were looking after this whenua and the people of this land. All our tipuna are buried here. We care for the place like it's part of us because it is part of us. And while political terms come and go and they're only like a 3-year horizon, we don't make decisions on a short-term basis. We make decisions on the behalf of future generations and our mokopuna, what we call mokopuna decision-making. And it's all about the collective. It's all about the best for the collective, not about the individuals. And this makes us excellent kaitiaki or caregivers for this district. I'm concerned that in New Zealand at the moment, there's a lot of dangerous rhetoric and misinformation around about co-governance and what that means. And some say that this move would divide us from, is divisive. I'd say it's completely the opposite. Keeping us from the table is what divides us. Not working together for the betterment of our district divides us. We need to move forward together, not apart. We need to be on the same team. We're much stronger together. And as the research proves, the more diversity you have at the decision-making table, the better the quality of the decisions. And just like Mabel said, we are here to support, and we would support, and we'd be alongside to back and support you on the journey. And today's vote should not be about winning a popularity contest. It's not about being swayed by the sadly ignorant majority who don't understand the intention or the importance of the treaty relationship. And sadly, that is the case in New Zealand to this day. Not everybody understands the value that Māori bring to the table, nor do they understand the mechanisms of local government, but you guys do. And this is not about opinion, this is about facts. It's also about leading from the heart. It's about fairness and it's about social justice. You're all here on a mandate that you're elected on your community, on behalf of your community. And so you've got the ability to make this decision. And it's not about what other people think. I believe it's about doing the right thing and making the right decision and voting in support of Māori Wards. And I just want to say gratitude in advance for making the right decision. Thank you. Questions?
Thank you. Did anyone have a question of Ms. Galyer-Douglas? No? Okay, thank you very much. Next I have Bronwyn Hokianga.
Kia ora. Ko te me tuatahi pihi atura ngā manu whenua o Tauranga Moana, tēnā tātou, ko Bronwyn Hokianga tōku ingoa. I'm here in support of the Māori Wards, and here are my reasons why. But first, I want to take the opportunity to acknowledge the work that mana whenua and ihu o te waka, o te aroa, have done to date in terms of the Māori Wards, tēnā tātou katoa. It is also important to acknowledge the efforts made by the Council in recognising the significance of Māori as partners, stakeholders and community members. However, it is equally important to critically analyse whether these previous and current efforts are enough for our people. To determine if enough is enough, it is critical to consider factors such as the level of inclusion and diversity, partnership and te tiriti o waitangi, cultural understanding and sensitivity, empowerment and self-determination, transformational changes, environmental stewardship, human well-being, economic development, social services and support, housing and infrastructure, recreation and community spaces. All of these through all the representation of Māori voices and the impact of these decisions on the Māori community. Are our perspectives genuinely valued and incorporated into the decision-making processes, or are we merely consulted as a formality? Furthermore, it is necessary to assess the outcomes of these decisions and whether they effectively address the needs and aspirations of the Māori community. Are the decisions leading to positive changes in the lives of Māori people, promoting social and economic well-being and fostering true partnership? If the Council's commitment to including Māori in decision-making processes is genuine and results in meaningful inclusion and positive outcomes for the Māori community, then it could be considered a good starting point. However, ongoing evaluation and dialogue are necessary to ensure continuous improvement and to address any shortcomings that may exist. Adding Māori Wards is an important step in ensuring the representation and participation of Māori in local government decision-making processes. Māori Wards would allocate specific seats on the Council for Māori representatives, ensuring that the voices are not only included, but also empowered within the decision-making arena. Implementing Māori Wards would acknowledge the unique status of Māori as tangata whenua and recognise our rights, perspective and aspirations. It would provide a dedicated platform for Māori issues to be raised, discussed and addressed within local governance structures, helping to rectify historical disparities and advance equality, equity and social justice. Furthermore, Māori Wards can contribute to the more inclusive and diverse local government system, enhancing the overall democratic process. By fostering active Māori participation, these wards can facilitate the sharing of Māori knowledge, values and cultural perspectives, enriching the decision-making process and leading to more informed and balanced outcomes. It is worth noting that the introduction of the Māori Wards is a decision that needs to be made collectively and through meaningful kōrero with Māori community. The process should involve open dialogue and engagement with all stakeholders to ensure their input, concerns and aspirations are considered. Ultimately, the aim is to create a system that truly reflects the shared values, diversity and aspirations of all people, including Māori. My good friend, Kiri Tamihere said last week, the only people that can make mokopuna decisions is us. Kia ora tātou.
Any questions for Bronwyn? No? No, good, okay. So we'll next move to Keith Hay.
Your Worship,
Councillors, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. The Cadicat Waihi Beach Residents and Ratepayers Association is opposed to the introduction of Māori wards in Western Bay of Plenty District because we believe they compromise the principles of democracy. Tiara, the Encyclopedia of New Zealand, states that we are a representative democracy with a parliament consisting of members who represent the voters who elected them. Generally speaking, voters' views are considered and acted on indirectly by their elected members. A referendum, a poll of voters on a particular issue, gives voters an opportunity to express their views directly. In 2017, our group was active in forcing a referendum after council voted to introduce Māori wards. The result of that referendum was that 78% of those who voted did not want Māori wards. The report prepared by staff for this meeting states that, quote, based on the previous poll result, it is anticipated that some members of the community will not support the establishment of Māori wards. Since when has it been acceptable to describe 78% of the 44% of eligible people who voted as some? The first principle of the Local Electoral Act is, quote, fair and effective representation for individuals and communities. We can use the Bay of Plenty Regional Council 2022 election results as an example. In the Western Bay of Plenty general constituency, there were 11,628 votes cast per vacancy, while in the Māori constituency for the same area, there were 2,251 votes cast for one vacancy. The successful candidates in the general seat had to get more than 4,217 votes, but the successful candidate in the Māori seat needed only to get more than 901. Is it sensible to have 2 Māori seats available on district council when only 2,251 votes were cast in the Māori ward that covers the Western Bay in the last election? This is not fair and effective representation. The report in the agenda states that Māori make up 17% of our population. It also states, quote, the decision relates to the Māori electoral population within our district, which is 7,710. Out of a total electoral population of 52,000. Well, that's 14.8%. However, the Māori population of the district at the last census was 19.2%. Why are we even discussing this proposal when staff can't get these critical numbers correct? And what proportion of these Māori people are actually on the Māori electoral roll? We dispute the staff interpretation of this proposal in regard to council's policy. One, the decisions affect all of the community. The referendum was voted on by 44% of those eligible to vote, which is more than normally vote at the Western Bay of Plenty District Council local body elections. Community interest in the proposal is high, as demonstrated above. Community views are known from previous engagement processes, and they are strongly opposed to this proposal. To knowingly override these views without consultation is extremely arrogant. The decision is not really reversible, given all of the other legislation planned for local government. We do not believe the statement that there will be public engagement process with the community during the representation review. Council has demonstrated complete disregard of ratepayers' concerns and failed to carry out consultation on Three Waters and on the future of local government. If you vote to introduce Māori wards today, you will be demonstrating that voters' views are being overridden. You will be abusing the trust of the people who elected you and pay your salaries. You have no mandate for this. You need to let this resolution lie on the table until after the general election, when it can be considered more objectively. Thank you.
there any questions of Mr. Hay? It's only from elected members, I'm afraid. But no, there be none. Okay, so last speaker I have listed is Gary Weber.
Ina kai kaurihera, ina kai mahi, ina mema o te tangata tiriti whānau, e te huna pānui. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Councillors, staff, tangata tiriti iwi, which is all of us, and the media, greetings. For me, this is the third time I have been involved in the discussions surrounding the creation of the Māori Ward for the Western Bay Plenty District Council. This time I'm in a slightly different position. But the age-old saying, third time lucky, comes to mind. In recent years, contrary to what we've just heard, recent legislation has been amended to fully align the processes for the creation of Māori wards with the creation of general wards. There is only one set of rules now. I remind every councillor that's here today, you have signed your oath of allegiance to the Crown and all the laws of New Zealand. It's in writing. You cannot back down from it. Furthermore, the legislation spells out in detail the process you must follow, I reiterate, must follow, to go through a representation review. Furthermore, the Local Government Commission has prepared a set of guidelines for councils and an explanatory note, which you should all have in front of you. Both are guidelines for you to follow when undertaking a representation review. I am sure, because you're well-read councillors, you have read pages 1 to 10 of the guidelines. But in particular, I draw your attention to clause 1.10 under related processes. The second bullet point references establishment of Māori wards, and clause 1.11, which reads, these decisions, Māori wards, are not formally part of the representation review process and are matters for local discretion with no right of appeal to the Commission. However, these options are important in helping to identify appropriate representation arrangements for a district and need to be resolved before detailed ward arrangements are determined. That is the law. On page 2 of the document that I have left in front of you, under the heading Representation Reviews, it reads, following council resolutions to establish Māori wards, councils consult with their community to help decide on what is a fair and effective number of elected members to have, how they are elected, whether they are elected from wards or at large, and whether STV or first past the post applies. Nowhere in the legislation or the Local Government Commission guidelines does it say you, as the current councillors, can delay a decision on the hope that the law may change. You have sworn your allegiance to the current laws. Not tomorrow. What's drifting in the clouds is not part of your gambit. I'm also hopeful that you're all aware that the Treaty of Waitangi is Aotearoa's New Zealand's founding document. That treaty is a partnership agreement signed in 1840 by Rangatira, representing about 120,000 Māori, the population of New Zealand at that day, and the Crown, representing all others, about 20,000. In 1840, the population split was about 85% Māori and 15% other. And voice was genuinely given to the minority partner by Māori. Councillors, you've seen the figures supporting the Māori Ward. They are contained in the agenda before you. Those figures are based on a prescribed formula both executive and councillors have to follow. Māori make up 17% of the population in our district, as specified in your document. That number, 17%, is the only evidence you as councillors need to make your decision. Do you as the current councillors not feel the time has arrived for you to give voice to your minority partner in the Western Bay of Plenty? There is no need for any further consultation on the creation of Māori wards. The legislation doesn't allow you. It is time to do what is tika, what is right. In closing, I quote Graham Odie, Professor of Philosophy at Massey University, from his foreword in John Patterson's book, Exploring Māori Values, and I quote, "This book has been written for those who, while they are familiar with Pākehā values and modes of thinking, are not as familiar with Māori values, but who are capable of standing back from their own ethical tradition with sufficient intellectual and critical detachment to consider seriously some alternatives, such as the Māori void. Alternatives that are suggested by a refreshingly different and surprisingly rich tradition. Finally, councillors, if you open your mind, and I accept that will be hard for some, the outcome of having a Māori ward would be far better decision-making for this council. Please don't say no and be an outlier in the statistics. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Councillor Joyce, you have a question.
Mr. Webber, can you point to me, please, to the exact clause that you refer to when you say we are not allowed to consult? Because I've got the Electoral Act in front of me and it doesn't say we're not allowed to.
You're absolutely correct, but the first process you have to go through, which is a council decision, is whether you have a Māori ward, yes or no.
No, it's not. It doesn't say that.
Well,
I've got the Act in front of me. So let's just be careful with what we're saying, because actually it does allow for consultation, or more importantly, it doesn't ban it. So please don't say it bans it, because it doesn't. I've got it in front of me.
Let's keep it to questions, Councillor Joyce, rather than
Well, I
debate.
asked the question, got the answer.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure there could have been a question in there, which gives me the right reply. I just go back to the basics. Do you think it's right not to give Māori 17%? And if you don't, then I assume you're so principled that you'll go to at large for every councillor and do away with wards. Thank you.
You're making presumptions.
It's not a question.
Thank you.
Okay. Right, I'm not aware of anyone no one's booked for a further public forum. I can't see anyone. No, okay, so we'll move to the report proper and ask Chris Napier and Rachel to present or to introduce it for us, please.
Tēnā koe te koromasua, tēnā hoki koutou ngā kaikaurikira. A tuatahi ake te mihi atu ki a koe kei te rangatira e te kira, nau I whakatūwheratia te hui I runga I te tuku karakia. A tai atu rā ki oku kaumātua, kuia, tuakana, tuahine, koutou rā I whakakano hia te whakahirahira o te kaupapa I tēnei rangi, tēnei rā ka mihi, pai atu rā ki te whare, tēnā tātou katoa. Your worship would be remiss of me to begin without acknowledging the people in the room that we have here today for what I acknowledge is an important decision that you and your councillors have to make. The report that's been provided to elected members, which you've had for a number of days now, outlines what we as staff consider is the information that you need in order to make that decision, and together with what you've heard this morning. On that basis, I propose, your worship, that we take the report as read and have staff here available to answer questions that you might have to support your deliberations. Kia ora rā.
Sure, Chris, thank you for that introduction. So what I would like to do is open up for questions, and I will just give you fair warning, it is going to be questions, not statements, opinions, that'll come later. So does anyone wish to ask questions of Chris or Rachel or any other staff member? Wow, okay. Oh, Councillor Granger.
Yes, I just had a question on the issues and options section. Thank you, your worship, where it talks, I didn't realise I was going to be the first one up, so I haven't got my page in the right place. Under option A, in costs, it says not applicable. And I just wonder how that statement gets there in terms of the fact that there must be some differential cost depending on the number of wards you have and what you're doing in an election.
Okay, I'll ask Rachel to respond to that, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. In forming in concluding that there would be no additional costs associated with establishing a Māori ward, the assumption is that the remuneration authority determines the remuneration applicable for elected members, including a Māori ward member, and it would be split according to that formula.
No, sorry, the question was about the election process, not the remuneration of the result.
The costs associated with holding an election that establishes a Māori ward would be included within budgeted expenditure for the ordinary local body election, which is budgeted and transparently included within our long-term plan.
Okay, so there's no further questions. I'm going to suggest that we take the recommendations in parts, and so with recommendation 1, do we have a mover and seconder to receive the report, please? Councillor Joyce, Councillor Granger. There's no discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Next one is the reports of the significance and engagement policy. Is there a mover and seconder for that recommendation, please? Councillor Murray Benj, Councillor Henry. There's no discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. And then I guess we come to the meat of it. Recommendation 3. Well, I'll look for a mover. Deputy Mayor Scrimger. Councillor Wickers, seconded. Sorry, please. Moved Deputy Mayor Scrimger, seconded Councillor Wickers. Thank you. And that's 3A. So that is that in accordance with the discretion conferred by Section 19Z of the Local Electoral Act, Māori wards shall be established for the next 2 triennial elections in 25 and 28. So, Deputy Mayor Scrimger would like to speak to your motion.
Certainly, thank you. Yeah, and I'm pleased to be able to move this recommendation. We've heard a lot already this morning, and it is indeed a legislative requirement that we consider this as part of our representation review. It's important, to me anyway, that we meet our legislative requirements and deadlines. I acknowledge that there is significant body of opinion in the community, and we've even heard it referred to this morning, that we should await the outcome of the general election in a couple of months' time. However, I believe it's important we deal with what's in front of us now and the laws as they currently stand. We don't, as a council, want to fail to meet our obligations, nor do we want to have a decision made for us. To not make a decision would be a failure of governance responsibility. We can't change past poor decisions, but we can determine to act in an honourable way today. Just a couple of acknowledgements I'd like to make. Firstly, in regard to Judge Trapsky's decision 20-something years ago in regard to his investigation of setting up Māori wards for Bar Plenty Regional Council. He was very clear in his statement that such a decision was not a separatist decision, but it was about enabling a section of the community to have a say. I also want to acknowledge the mamai that has been felt in the community through the overturning of the decision made 6 years ago to put Māori wards in place and then being overturned by the poll. After that decision 6 years ago, I pondered long and hard about whether a Māori ward was the best solution for Māori, given that they would probably only be able to vote for one candidate in their ward instead of 3 or 4, as in other wards. However, Māori have continued to be entirely consistent in their request for a Māori ward. And just last week, I came across this little comment, if I might read it. It says that business analyst Francis Evans once studied 125 insurance salesmen to find out what made them successful. Surprisingly, competence wasn't the key. Instead, Evans found customers were more likely to buy from salesmen with the same politics, education, and even height as them. And I must say that was something of a light bulb moment for me. It revealed why Māori were so keen to have a Māori ward. They wanted to vote for someone that they could identify with and have them represent their interests. So, Mr. Mayor, I am pleased to be able to make this recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you, David Mayor Scrimger. I'll allow the seconder to now speak to the motion. Councillor Wickers.
Thank you, Your Worship. You beat me, John. E honore he korore ki te ato, e mangarongo ki te whenua, e whakaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa. He mihi tuatahi ki te mātua nui te rangi, ko e rā te kāinga o ngā me katoa. He mihi tuarua ki te tangata Māori, haere, haere, haere mai rā. He mihi tuatoru ki te manuhiri katoa i te whare mo te take o te rā. Ka nui te mihi ki a koutou, nau mai, haere mai, whakatau mai rā. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I'll translate that for my Pākehā whānau. So, honour and glory to the Lord, peace on earth and goodwill to all people. I'm acknowledging our Father in heaven, who is the creator of us all, and all parties that are present here today to discuss this matter. You are all warmly welcomed. The matter we are discussing and deciding on is representation, and specifically representation at the council table. This consideration is part of a wider review on how our community wishes to be represented in local government. This is the time to see if things could be done in a better way, or better representation at a place where the decisions are made in regard to significant aspects of living in our district. A very good friend of mine continually reminds me, there is always a better way. So today I bring the voice of tangata whenua to the table as one of the elected representatives to speak on their behalf, because this is what I was elected to do. Their message has been clear and consistent over many years. They don't feel they are fairly and effectively represented as individuals and as communities, which is a key principle in the Electoral Act. I swore an oath when I began this role that I would faithfully and impartially and according to the best of my skill and judgment, execute and perform in the best interests of the Western Bay of Plenty. As I've contemplated the decision in the time leading up to today, I've explored arguments for and against the proposal and came to a simple question that gave me the clarity that I needed today. The simple question was this: could Māori wards achieve a fairer and more effective representation? And the answer was yes, and I could not find an argument against it. This, I believe, is the key consideration in weighing the decision. While I try my best to represent Māori as I'm doing today, I know that there are those who can do a more complete job. And I would value the opportunity to sit beside He Tangata Māori as one who stands for the position and through a democratic process is voted in by a majority of those of the ward they represent. And no reira. So in my judgment, I believe that I am upholding my oath in supporting this motion, as it will satisfy the principle of better representation, which is the purpose of this representation review. I've written on the back of my shirts, that is for my business, is the statement, make it better, and I believe I'm doing that. So I wanted to move so I get a right of reply, but since this is my last opportunity, I want to put out two challenges. First is to my fellow colleagues. And while there are multiple arguments that are known and have been heard here today, I propose that the question that you must all answer is this: do the arguments promote better representation? As this is the main consideration for this decision, regardless of your personal views. He wero ki te tangata Māori. If this vote is successful, you've got 2 years to prepare and give us the best you've got. Thank you.
Okay, looking for further speakers for or against. Councillor Joyce.
I believe in Māori Wards, contrary to the presumption of one or two other people. I supported them at last year's election, and I see no reason today to waver from that mandate. Thankfully, our current code of conduct supports that stance, that if you campaign on an issue, you can be expected to follow through accordingly. So why do I, an acknowledged Scrooge and, tight ass on the council, support Māori Wards? Well, first of all, partnership is deeply and rightly entrenched into our constitutional arrangements set by Parliament. All the big political parties are committed to the Treaty of Waitangi, and it has been included in well over 70 pieces of legislation, including the Local Government Act, which is what we're discussing today. And that has been from a veritable rainbow of political parties, the right, the left, everybody. This is a pretty settled piece of law. It's been in place for a long time. This is not a radical proposal. Secondly, inclusion is an important principle of governorship and in management theory generally. It's already been referred to this morning. Having guaranteed Māori members will help us be a better council. This is not a zero-sum game where one treaty partner wins at the expense of the other. We can work together to make better decisions, bringing different perspectives. Anyone who has spoken to our local hapu and iwi leaders know they want to strengthen our whole community. Māori Wards work. They are no longer an experiment. Our regional council has had them for 20 years, and no one seems to mind. Parliament has had Māori seats for around 150 years, and it has carried on making decisions, sometimes good, sometimes bad. Importantly, Māori Wards are empowering. Some have suggested, and some other parts of the country have done this, that we appoint Māori representatives onto the council. There is mana for all of us on the council that we are elected by our peers, who can then remove us if they don't like what we do. A representative appointed by the council and serving at the grace and the favour of the council does not look like empowerment to me. Māori Wards are democratic. They preserve the very important principle of one person, one vote that's enshrined in our Bill of Rights. This is really important to me. Democracy has been developing over the last 2,500 years, if not longer. It's still not perfect, but it is a better system than any other system out there, particularly, I would note, when it comes to protecting the rights of minorities. Not always very well, mind you, but better than any other system. Have a look at Asia, where in many, many cases, democracy has been curbed in favour of groups claiming special rights and special privileges. I've lived and worked in Asia around 15 years as a journalist, and in various Asian countries, both rich and poor. I can tell you that downward slides in the economy and the erosion of rights often start with one group or other claiming more rights than others. One of the reasons I like Māori Wards is that no one's claiming more rights. They just want one person, one vote. The end result in Asia has often been a screwed up country for everyone, including those who started out claiming to be more special than others. This proposal is important because it means our individual votes all count roughly the same. Our Māori whānau just have to choose where they want to vote. Māori wards even have an elegant exit clause built into them. If Māori decide they no longer need a Māori electoral roll and switch back to the general roll, that will end the system. We are not elected to this council to challenge constitutional law or engage, frankly, in culture wars. We're here to make the best decisions we can for our people, for all our people. There's a but though, and it's been a long time coming, but there is a but. We should consult widely on this and seek to bring our community along with us in this decision. It seems ridiculous to me that we consult on the colour of a concrete path, on where we're going to put dog parks, but we are told we don't need to talk to a wide range of our communities about this much more important matter. If we consult, if we talk to people, it will be difficult. There are some passionate views out there, but I think we might be surprised at the change in views in our community since the last debate 6 years ago. I really do. I am no expert on tikanga Māori, so please tell me if I'm talking out my ass. But I thought one of the cool things on the marae was that you talk through matters extensively, exhaustively if need be, rather than just say, no, this is it, get on and vote and go for it. Yet that is the process we've been asked to follow today. I would much rather talk this through. Yeah. Pass it in principle. I want a positive motion forward, but I would like to talk to our people. One other thing I'll add, and then I'll shut up, which is unusual for me. Everyone here is here for the community, right? We may not agree with each other, but there's not one person in this room with bad intent. I'm a bit concerned with some of the labels being thrown around. This person's racist, this person's separatist. We need to get past that. We need to be able to disagree and move forward. You know where I stand, but I'm not going to throw personal attacks on someone because I disagree with them. And we need to grow up a little bit and realize it's okay to have different views. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Joyce. Next was Councillor Henry.
So I am in support of this motion and I'm support of it and hope that we can work towards a better New Zealand and a more enriched New Zealand with the culture that the different cultures that we have in New Zealand. And it was definitely anticipated that there would be some members of the community that did not support the establishment of Māori wards, but in our learning with working with our two Māori forums and other members of the community, we have learned that this is not the view of the Māori. They would like the establishment of the Māori ward, and that is our role to represent the views of the community. But it does concern me, and I would like us to move past this and have a Māori ward so we don't have to come up with this situation. This is the third time now, and all I can see is it creates division within the community and between the communities, and I don't believe that that is healthy. It's not a good outcome for the community's children to be watching this sort of happening continually. So it's not a New Zealand that I want future generations of New Zealanders to live up and grow up in. And we're looking at one ethnicity in the community, but the decision we're talking about today is based on a treaty partnership with people working together. So Māori voice, I believe, is essential to be there. It's adding value to any decision making that we make at the table.
we're multicultural, but we have a treaty that we're honouring now by making this decision. Yeah, I'm hopeful. I do worry about our children who are watching this. I'm 30 years in the education department and teaching children, and they're very aware about what's out there in the community and what people are talking about. We need to have one big melting pot, togetherness, not divisiveness. We need to work together and learn from each other and move forward for a better New Zealand.
Thank you, Councillor Henry. Next up, I have Councillor Coxhead.
Thank you, everybody, for your kōrero and your speeches. Thank you very much. I've learned a lot this morning. Whilst I appreciate this is the third time this has come up for others in this council, it's the first time for me. And I have to admit that I feel incredibly rushed in this process, and I do feel that the questions I've had haven't necessarily been answered for the wider community. So to the point about greater consultation, I would very much welcome community consultation on this. And I appreciate the last time a referendum was held, that result may or may not have changed since then. But I'm also acutely conscious of something I did ask at our workshop. There are 50% of Māori who are not on the Māori roll, they're on the general roll. And I want to understand from those people why that is. I've had limited time to do my own research, and I have distanced myself in terms of what I might personally think. I am doing this objectively, and I want to understand this fully for all people. And so I have done my own, well, I have had limited time due to a personal situation. However, I've talked to my Māori family members and Māori friends who are eligible for being on the Māori roll, and without exception, they're all on the general roll. And you could argue you're automatically defaulted into their system, but these are all people who have politically made their own choices. They understand what they're doing. So, Mabel, to your point, you want better for your grandchildren and your children. My grandchildren and my children too are Māori, and I want to make the right decision for them, but I also want to and have to make the right decision for everybody's grandchildren and children. And I'm sorry, at this stage, I don't feel informed enough to be able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coxhead. May I inquire, were you speaking for or against the motion?
Against.
Thank you. Next up, I have Councillor Sol, who is on Zoom.
Thank you, sir. Can you hear me? Am I heard? Can you hear me? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, yes we are.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Okay, tēnā koutou katoa. And a welcome to all those that have attended the meeting today. Those, of course, of you that are my fellow councillors and staff, etc. there. And of course, the tangata whenua and people of the community. So I'm going to lay a little bit of a background here on myself, okay? So I basically, I guess we'll put it in a simple sense. Ko Taranaki te moanga. Ko Aotea te wa. Ko Wangura te awa. Ko Ngāti Ruanui te iwi. Ko Ngāti Tupuna te hapu. Ko Wharapuni te marae. Alan Sol, taku ingoa. So my background, whilst it has been in the world as it's been for years, I guess a lot of people see it as a European world. I was still brought up within a stone's throw of my family's marae in the first instance, and then not too much further away later in my youth, I guess. So I strongly sit with the fact that I am part Māori. I also will say that I will be one of those people of the 50% of Māori that chooses not to be on the Māori roll. I choose to be on the general roll. And funny enough, in the last 3 weeks or so, I have an uncle, 89 years old, all right, 89 years old, who has been on the Māori roll and decided this time is enough. It is time to get off this Māori roll and become a general citizen of New Zealand. Now, this man is one of our kaumātua. He has been a strong person and influence in many areas, but he was not one of our settlement negotiators. He has been more active in the part of how we used the money when Ngāti Ruanui settled and what it did for the community and for Māori in particular, sure, but across the community, everybody. And that was one of the key things to how he sees things and how he worked. And he's now chosen, from what he sees, to move over to the other side, shall we say. So that's me. So I guess the next question I have is I look around me and I ask you to look around you right now. I ask you to look across at the members at the table that are making this decision today. Are they greater than you, more important than you? Are they so far above you? Or maybe are they your equals? I believe we are all equal. I believe Māori are equal, as I do Indian, etc. in New Zealand. People that are New Zealanders, and to be honest, if you take it to a race, I believe in the human race. And I believe that we have got to be people that look and work towards having a more harmonious whole community, not looking after factions, but working with. I believe council has done a very good job of working with our people, various minorities, and in various areas of maybe industry and social services. That's what we do. We've been elected to actually look after our community and make decisions for our community. And those that can't make that decision, then I'm sorry for them. We take information fed to us and we have to follow it, listen to it, and put it together and come up with what we believe. Now, I see that also from our Tikanga Māori department. That's what they're for. So I have no issue about Māori being on council. I welcome it. I supported Māori actually in the election, in the last election myself with personal votes, and that's the case. But on a basis that they were people that I believe can make it, can go and do it, create a better world, a more useful and operational council decision-making process. So I see all New Zealanders equal, and that's the case. 2 months ago, I had an accident. And so I wound up being taken into A&E and had to fill in a form. And again, one of the things that annoys me is they ask me my ethnicity. And I am extremely proud of my Māori blood, very proud of my Māori blood. I really hold so strongly to it. And I believe Māori are very valuable and do wonderful things. We have our hard cases, just like any other group of people, any family. But I hold to it so strongly. And when they ask me my ethnicity, I say Kiwi or New Zealander. And that's how it is. That's how strongly I feel about this in our country and our ability to actually do things and work together. So to me, if you don't see yourself as unequal, whatever the word is, as not being equal, then I would almost consider it patronising that somebody makes a special place for you. That's bad. I do not feel that that is the way to get ahead, but it is the decision that people want. If that's the case, that's how it is. I believe that to protect those special places is totally wrong and not beneficial to the decision-making and future of our district and our country. And yes, I took those same vows, and I believe in for the good and unbiasedly towards our district, and that is my belief. So that's where I hold that. And I think I won't actually go into one or two other things there, but there are lots of other ethnicities here in New Zealand, and maybe they have a special need too. So, you know, I think we've got to go forward that perhaps we need to be able to stand, sorry, former Mayor, gosh, apologies to the Mayor and to former Mayor Gary Weber. Gary Weber, sir, you did say maybe we should have the courage to go and stand alone in wild situation. Don't disagree if that's where it is, not at all. I guess the one of the other things that really gets to me is that what was recognised as one of the greatest pieces of constitutional law ever put forward, or form of constitution, was the American Constitution. It was heralded up and down the world.
Okay, let's settle down. Let's speak.
It's had 27 amendments, and it was only written 53 years before the Treaty of Waitangi. That is the fact. So if that's the case, I think something else we ought to look at. So as a person, and anybody that knows me knows that I actually support history extremely strongly. I still have some positions or belong to an organisation that supports history, local history, and I certainly have been in a position where I totally believe in the keeping, gathering, honouring, etc., and the telling of the stories of our history. So I guess in the end, sir, there have been broken promises on both sides. There have been times when Maori could have changed this if this is what was wanted by them 100 years ago, 150 years ago, maybe 70 years ago. It is not. So I ask, if it's based on the Treaty of Waitangi, maybe we also ought to let the people look at it and say, this perhaps, just saying perhaps, this actual document, a great piece of our history, maybe not fit for purpose today. I will vote against. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sol. Can I confirm you're speaking against the motion, I presume?
Yes, sir, that was again.
Yeah, there were a broad range of issues covered, but okay. Next up, I have Councillor Thwaites.
Good morning, Mayor James. Perhaps been rather tall today. Less might be more for me, short words. As a young councillor represented to this chamber over 12 years ago, I came in and faced this exact vote in 2011. It's no surprise I was one of the 6 recorded voting for the establishment of Māori Ward. The then mayor, although supporting the ward, opted to stay with the status quo as a tiebreaker when it was 6-all. 6 years later, in 2017, I was one of the 9 that got it to a 9-3. There was great celebration that day, but it hasn't come to fruition. So here we are 6 years on, my 3rd attempt. So I read this morning about an old charm back in the old country, or Scottish heritage where I come from, being 3rd a charm. So this is my 3rd attempt at it. So I fully support recommendation 3A. Just touch on a couple of speakers this morning. Mabel touched on patterns in the rest of the country, and I agree with you, Mabel. I was really proud to be a Bay of Plenty citizen a number of years ago when Bay of Plenty Regional Council established, and I think we've lost our way a little bit in our local area, so hopefully today's decision might rectify that. Bronwyn talked about continuous improvement, and I fully endorse that, Bronwyn. I think anything that we do to enhance our decision making is exactly right, and you just nailed it there. So I welcome Māori representation. I think it will be great for this part of the district. And I know it's controversial, and I won't call it 3 waters. I'll call it just the waters. The resolution of the waters going forward, I wonder which tie to wear today, and I wore my Bay of Plenty rugby tie because we all come together as big whānau for the whole of this region. And like it or not, I believe that the solution ultimately for our water situation lies in the Bay of Plenty, and us all, regardless of which iwi, which hapu, which whānau family we belong to, we should work together and guard. I know Māori sometimes tell me that, Don, those artificial boundaries you create aren't quite right, but I think the ones circling the Bay of Plenty do and capture a certain part. And I believe our long-term solution is working together. So to cut it off at that, I will be supporting recommendation 3A. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Councillor Thwaites. Next up, I have Councillor Murray Benj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Listening to the debate, and I appreciate that so many people have come this morning and have different views. Auntie Mabel, for you marrying a European Englishman, I have part Maori grandchildren, and I hope that they have a free choice as to who they might marry in the future, and it will not be based on race. You have to understand 50%, over 50% of the population are not represented at this table, and that's we women. And yet the men will make the decisions for us and have done for too many years. And Maria Ngatai was the first woman to serve on Tauranga City Council, and she did it with grace and judgment. So, sir, I come from the South Island. Oh, by the way, when talking about sport, when you talk about sport, Don, Ruia Morrison was the finest tennis player in New Zealand, and she is alive and comes from Rotorua. I don't think, like me, she's playing that much tennis today.
That's about my bench. Can we keep it on topic? I think we're getting a bit away.
I am. She's a female leader, sir. And so I'm talking, I'm just acknowledging if it's good enough to talk rugby, I'm happy to talk tennis. So I was a councillor when the majority of councillors favoured the establishment of Māori Ward in 2017. A large number of ratepayers petitioned for a referendum, and on that decision, the referendum was duly held, and over 78% of those who voted were opposed to the creation of separate Māori wards. Similar referenda were held all over the country, and almost in every case, Wairoa was the single exception. The creation of Māori wards was resoundingly rejected. Even in Whakatane, where many citizens are Māori, the creation of separate Māori wards was rejected. In a sense, that should not have been a surprise. If Māori candidates cannot get elected to council, where roughly half the population is Māori, it may be that Māori citizens themselves are not interested in choosing their councillors on the basis of their ancestry. There are several arguments sometimes made in favour of Māori wards. One is that we already have wards based on geography, so why not wards based on race? But the two kinds of wards are fundamentally different, of course. Wards based on geography are wards created for convenience to improve the ability of ratepayers to contact their councillors. Wards based on race imply that those ratepayers who chance to have some Māori ancestry will have fundamentally different interests and concerns from those of all other New Zealanders. And I reject that. Second, it is sometimes argued that we need Māori wards because otherwise Māori can't get elected to council. We know that is nonsense. In the last council, 2 councillors, 20% of our number were Māori. Women were just 3 councillors, and we have over 50% of the population. And I don't mind whether you're Māori, Chinese, or European, or whatever, but we need women at this table. We currently have one of our honourable councillors from Katikati who is Māori. We know all over the country Māori have been elected to councils or as mayors, and the Mayor of Rotorua, Tania Tapsell, is a perfect example. We also know that Tauranga has had Māori represented the electorates in Parliament every single year since 1984, with a single exception, 2005 to 2008, when Bob Clarkson held it. In other words, for just 4 years of the 39 last year, Tauranga was elected a Māori to represent them. This hardly suggests that the Bay of Plenty residents are biased against Māori. Third, it is also noted that we have a Māori electorates in Parliament since 1867. So why not Māori wards in local government? But the Māori electorates were created to meet a very specific need. At that time, in our history, only men and women who owned property got a vote. And since most Māori property was owned communally at that time, almost no Māori men got the vote. So Māori electorates were created in which every Māori man over the age of 21 got a vote, not the women, take note. Those separate electorates should have been scrapped. They were initially created for just 5 years when all men got the vote, but they were retained. The Royal Commission on the Electoral System concluded in 1986 that there was not a very effective way of Māori influencing the process, and recommended they abolished if New Zealand adopted MMP, which of course we did in 1996. It became the official policy of the National Party that they be scrapped in 2003. Mr. Mayor, I believe strongly that as the Treaty of Waitangi made clear that 180 years ago, all New Zealanders have the same rights and privileges. Creating racial division between us by creating racially separate based wards is fundamentally wrong. It's important that we hear the concerns of Māori ratepayers in the same way that it is important that we hear the concerns of all other ratepayers, European, Indian, Chinese, and so on. We're all guaranteed equal status under the treaty. And the treaty is an important document, and I just think we don't treasure it enough. And so I look at the people who have represented us in the past, who were good friends. Maria Ngatai, I certainly enjoyed coffee and tea with her, plus the grandchildren's biscuits. Karina Burrell, who lost her tongue to cancer in Te Puna. Bob Tai, who has since died also. He was a Te Puna boy who lived in Christchurch where I knew him, and his wife, Maria Tate. And so I then come up here and we have so many hapus. How do we actually get the voice of the local community? How do we embrace people? If people have a problem in my territory, if they ring me, I go and see them and understand the issue. I think it's one of the greatest privileges I have had in my life, is the number of people that I have met because I'm in local government, and I'm happy to work with those people, find out what the issues are and try and help them. I don't always succeed, but I do my level-headed best. I appreciate the fact that other councillors may have a different view, but in my world, and I have had a leadership role in local government, you cannot treat people differently. In whatever else we do, you meet them as equals, and you cannot see it differently. It is one thing to sit at this table and see, we will have a Māori ward because that's important and we know best. We don't know best, and until we ask our communities, it's impossible to say what really is the answer. So I absolutely love working with Rion, and he would make a great councillor. And he's one of those people who speaks fluently in Māori and then has the politeness and the consideration to translate it into English for me. And I love you. I think you're just like Sean Kingi, a wonderfully kind individual. There are, that's showing my colours. So I agree with Mr. Keith Hay, the consultation. We consult on everything at this table. We've spoon-fed with consultation, and we hear what people are saying. And the day we stop listening to our communities, we should not be at this table. So I vote against it on the grounds I want to have some opinion from the community as to where they stand. We've heard from Māori, we have not heard from others. As Councillor Cox said, what about all those people and Councillor Sol that are sitting on the general roll? Where do they stand? We should know before, in fact, we pass a judgment like this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Murray Benj. I have Councillor Granger next.
Thank you, Your Worship. When a sector of our community approaches us to request a community park or accommodation for a men's shed or whatever it might be, we as a council seek to provide for that request, and if we can deliver, we do. I think it's a very similar way that the Maori community has requested the establishment of Māori Ward, and we as a council have the ability to do so and should do so. However, I'm personally very disappointed about the process that has got us here to today. The local government electoral legislation bill is currently before the House, and we could have waited a couple of weeks to see what happened to that bill before holding this important council meeting. The bill could be enacted as it stands. The bill could be changed in some way at the third reading, or it could fail to pass before the House rises. And without full certainty of the legislative parameters under which we could be operating, I believe it is unwise to proceed and make a decision which could be subject to legal challenge. We're bound to make a decision by the 23rd of November. I submit that we still have time to do that and wait to see what the fate of the local electoral legislation bill is, and that would not, if we had waited, it would not detrimentally impede the proper due process of council. But we are where we are, and the meeting was called anyway. So I just, I feel it's been bad governance, and that's my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Granger. Councillor Daly.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Māori Wards, what a dilemma. For an elected member, this is one of those blowtorch on the Y-fronts moments, which we get once or twice every triennium, it seems. I've written a speech. It's more coherent and hopefully more logical than ad-libbing. I thought it might be too long and could easily have added more points. However, while many of you here today have no doubt about what we should do next, we know that a large proportion of our residents and ratepayers have a different view on the matter. And that is what makes this decision so difficult today. Some of us have been there before. 6 years ago, we were asked the same question. Council of the day voted 9-3 to establish a Māori ward in our district. However, a referendum was called and 40% of the eligible voters voted it down, 78% against 22% for. It was a strong message. The other 60% of people eligible to vote either didn't care, weren't bothered, or had no idea what it meant. So what does it mean? Clearly for tangata whenua, it means a great deal, as witnessed by this huge gathering of Māori present here today, expectant of a favourable outcome. It is a self-evident truth that Māori hold a unique wasn't going to do this. Unique place within New Zealand as the Indigenous population, when much stronger nations arrived here with the capability of annihilating the locals if they so wished. Instead, a respectful partnership treaty was entered into 183 years ago with the Queen of England that protected tangata whenua, the people of the land, and recognised their existing property rights, a mutually beneficial arrangement that endures to this day. Much of the legislation that local government and resource management plans must abide by stems from that treaty and states that councils must provide opportunities or mechanisms for effective tangata whenua representation and participation in their decision-making processes. Democratically elected Māori councillors would satisfy that requirement. It would mean certainty there would be at least one Māori voice at the council decision-making table. And why is that so important? Because over the years there have not been very many, if any, mana whenua Māori sitting at this table. It is simply a fact that the participating eligible voters of the Western Bay Planning District have demonstrated reluctance to vote for Māori candidates. It may be unintentional racism. It may be fear of the unknown, fear of venturing beyond the safety of who we know. We all know of people with radical views in our society. They're a bit scary. We're fearful of the consequences if their ideas gain traction. It is easy to characterise or malign some groups of people if they look or talk a certain way. In saying this, I acknowledge that often not many Māori have put their hands up to say, pick me. When they have, often the result is demoralising. Despite a high vote from Māori voters, the overall vote is simply not enough to get them over the line. I've been around long enough to know that you don't get onto council without some level of community recognition, whether through service to the community and business, sport, environment, social sector, or simply doing good in the hood. But even highly respected industrious leaders in their own Māori communities with many years of service and devotion to the well-being of their people may be unknown in the wider community and struggle to get elected to a forum like this. I can see how despair might set in. I felt it myself when I first stood unsuccessfully for this council. It's difficult to make the decision to have another go and open yourself to the possibility of defeat and humiliation one more time. Before she became Mayor of Rotorua, Tania Tapsell argued and voted against establishing Māori Wards for Rotorua Lakes Council. Māori people don't have any trouble getting elected to this council. We don't need Māori Wards, she said. However, I think we all know that in Western Bay Planning District Council and Tauranga City Council, that is not the case. Before they were turfed out, democratically elected councillors voted to establish a Māori Ward for Tauranga City. Bay Planning Regional Council has had 3 Māori Wards since 2001. Have you heard of any major issues in that council as a result of that? In 2021, the government removed the poll provisions in relation to creation of Māori Wards to have effect before the 2022 local government elections. Almost overnight, New Zealand went from having just 3 councils with Māori Wards to 34, over half of the total 67 councils in New Zealand. Last October, 66 councillors were elected to represent Māori communities. Like it or not, it is now an undeniable fact that the majority of New Zealand councillors have embraced Māori Wards in their council representation. While this is a solution to the problem that satisfies tangata whenua, ironically, it also has a limiting effect on further representation by concentrating a large majority of Māori voters in the Māori Ward, which may reduce the chance of other Māori candidates gaining traction in the other general wards. However, hopefully in time, the separatist or racist narrative we hear so often in political circles these days will become a thing of the past, and we do truly start to feel like one people with common goals and aspirations. Some of the people I've discussed whether or not we should have Māori Wards with have sometimes reluctantly agree that this is a step in the right direction that is at least democratically palatable or defendable. After all, we've had Māori seats in Parliament since 1867. In closing, an almost famous former National Party Cabinet Minister, widely acknowledged as being highly effective in his ministerial portfolios and other business ventures, recently stated his guiding philosophy, and I quote, "What are you actually trying to achieve, and what's the best mechanism to do it? Agree what you're trying to achieve, hire some good people and get on with it." That was, of course, Stephen Joyce. Interestingly, just last evening in this very room, our retiring Deputy CEO, Gary Ellis, gave his farewell speech. He also imparted his philosophy on how he got things done in this council. It was eerily similar to Stephen Joyce's and may explain why Gary's forceful work ethic has been so successful for the Western Bay. So if you transpose this slightly and say, agree what you're trying to achieve, elect some good people and get on with it, we might be close to where we want want or need to be. Is today the day we add another milestone to our own cultural history? Now, last words in te reo. If I may attempt without spoiling the broth, please don't shoot the messenger. Ka tae mai ngā mea pai ki te hanga e tatari. Good things come to those who wait. Mō koe kua roa te haere mai. For you, it has been a long time coming. Wai Māori e pai kia koe tangata whenua. Good luck to you, tangata whenua. Moka pōna whakatau. Moka pōna decisions. I've worn my 1970s tie today, just because I like it. But of course, that is the same era as the establishment of the Waitangi Tribunal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Daly. I now have Councillor Crawford. Thank you.
Kia ora. So I just want to acknowledge all you who arrived today. There's hardly anybody who's opposed to here today. So, you know, where's that 78%? I work in Te Puke, so I came into council because I came to represent my community. One of the experiences we're having in Te Puke is seeing a town that's actually collaborating and working together, and how powerful that is. And I too have been contemplating, like Tracy, you know, first time on council, first time we've had to address this matter. And so I've done a lot of my own investigation. I just recently was in Rarotonga for 8 days, came back, met a lot of New Zealanders over there, so had a chance to talk to a lot of different people. One thing that I really found was there's a lot of people who are not even aware or thinking about this, right? And so that's why I want to acknowledge you, is that you are thinking about this, you're here, you're present. And some of us enter in this space and in the political space, they're here because we're willing to go there and make decisions on behalf of our community, where a good part of a community are disinterested and disengaged. You know, and I said, to me, I found this revolutionary. The other thing that I've found is that that not all Māori I've talked to are actually for Māori wards. And, you know, and ask that question, you know, why is that the case? But personally, I see the importance of collaborating and being one as a nation. I want to acknowledge, you know, the origins, first people of this land, and we're reminded of that when we're Rarotonga. Something that when they use the word kia orana, then you repeat it back to your house, you know, and welcome. And they said, who's from New Zealand? And we say yes, and they says, welcome home. And acknowledging, you know, where, you know, I went to that point where the 7 walkers left and come to this land, and it was really good to be connected to that. I too have, my son-in-law is Māori, so I have Pukapona, the Māori, and I really care for their future. Being somebody working in the community and collaborating, I've seen the real importance of working with tangata whenua and with the local hapus and iwis in our area. And we are developing a really good relationship, and my experience of being in the community board first and now on the council have found it really enriching going on to marae and learning, you know, something that most of us here aren't, you know, at fay with. So I really appreciate and see the power of Māori being multicultural or bicultural, and sometimes multicultural, and just the richness of, we know when you learn language, part of learning language is learning culture, right? I lived in Mexico for a while, so I was learning Spanish, and I saw that how I learned the language was being in amongst the people. I tried to learn it through the proper way, but when you went and just learned conversational language and worked with the people, that's when it became real and you start to understand it. And So I really am supportive of this because you're not represented as well as you should be around this. Sure, we have our forums, and I've asked myself, is that enough? But I realise that when we sit around and we do workshops and we make decisions, to actually have the partnership people that we're journeying with to actually bring that worldview and that understanding is only going to be a good thing and not a bad thing. I'm for us becoming one people and working together than always having this tension. And saying that tension is not a bad thing either. You know, we shouldn't all be agreeing with each other. And I think that's an important part of the process too. So I just want to acknowledge that. So again, just want to thank you for all you who've turned up, and that it means something to you, you know, because there's a lot of disinterested people out there who just careless and don't think about it. And so some of us have to be in that place to make decisions. So that's what we're doing on behalf of our community today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. It just leaves me to speak before Deputy Mayor Scrimgeour can have his right to reply. Firstly, I want to acknowledge this process and acknowledge how my elected members have wrestled with this issue. I acknowledge it's a difficult one and a controversial one at times. And balancing the right decision with the popular decision is always going to be hard. And when I was elected in my inauguration, I said I would always try to make the right decision, not the popular one. I'm in favour of establishing Māori Ward Wards because that is the right thing to do. It is clear to me, the way I've approached it, it's clear to me that Māori representation at council is deficient. And it is no longer a radical or unknown option. 35 other councils have Māori wards, nearly half the total. It seems to work quite well. Sun still shines, sky's still there. And as I was reflecting on what Bronwyn said earlier in public forum about enriching decision-making processes, and that's where I've come from as well. It will lead to better, more inclusive decision-making at council. As Andy Galyer-Douglas said, a lot of people don't actually understand the mechanisms of local government and the fact that we have to talk to and get advice from and consult with Māori all the time on all sorts of issues. And it's just a lot better to have that in-house, as it were, where we can learn immediately what the issues are, rather than coming up with it ourselves and then checking if that's okay and getting it wrong. And this is a much better decision-making process. I think this decision also aligns with our strategic objectives, which we recently signed off for the long-term plan of building authentic Tiriti-based relationships. And I also want to just touch on the issue about consultation and what the people's views are. I mean, we all are in our communities all the time. This isn't a secret issue. This is something that's been well canvassed over the years, 2018 poll, but also just generally. And I would suggest listen to the young. It's just not an issue for them. Having Māori at the table, they act in surprise that this is even being debated, frankly. So, like with that, all our members around here have said lots of things very eloquently, and I thank them for that. And I again acknowledge how difficult this has been for you. But I'm going to leave it there and let Mayor Scrimgeour have the right to reply.
Thank you, Mayor James. There's a lot been said. Firstly, I failed when I spoke earlier to acknowledge all those who've come in today, whether you're in favour of this proposal or opposed to it. I want to acknowledge your interest and commitment for taking the time to come here today and for the input and feedback you've given us in the past. Secondly, I want to acknowledge Andy and apologise for stealing your right of reply. But you made your points very eloquently and very clearly. It's sad that this has become essentially a political decision, not just in this council, but across the country, where it is so difficult for Māori to be elected for councils, because in many cases people choose to vote along lines of race, and that's sad. This is an opportunity, though, for us to face up to our responsibilities, make a decision that gives us an opportunity to bring ourselves together and ensure that everybody gets a hearing. I want to emphasise this is not about establishing a race-based constituency. It's about honouring commitments that were made in the Treaty of Waitangi way back, as was said, 183 years ago. I know that there are many different views about what the intent of that treaty was, but it absolutely was, and no one can deny that it was about that we work together. And so it's important that we do that. I want to acknowledge again Judge Peter Trapsky, one of our finest judges, well known for his work across many fields, and the judgment that he made in terms of the preparations that were made for establishing Māori wards in the Bay of Plenty Regional Council. And others have already said it works. We've got the best example right here in our own Bay of Plenty, where they've been in place for 20 odd years. And I have to agree with my councillor, Margaret Murray-Benz here next to me, when she said it's important what we hear. It's important we hear what the people are saying. And I want to acknowledge Kaumātua Jeff Rice, chairman of our Te Arawa Partnership Forum, who last week said it's a no-brainer because it works. And I think that's wise advice. And so I urge you to vote in support of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Scrimgeour. So with that, and everyone having spoken, I shall put the motion, recommendation 3A, about that we shall establish Māori Ward or wards for the triennial elections 2025.
Can I call for a division, please?
Sure, I was going to do that anyway, but yes, sure. So I shall now put the motion and ask all those in favour to please raise their hands. You guys don't count, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You got it all down? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All those against, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, yeah. Okay. So it appears to be 9-3 in favour. Correct. Okay. In which case, I would declare that carried. Thank you.
Arohei ngā tonu kia rata, ko he atu. I tua o pairau e. E te marei kura, maria hon haere atu rā. Hoki wairua mai. Te wano haere atu rā. Pai ahi wana kore, rata ni tau toko, tēnei kau papa I ngā wā o mua, haere atu rā. Kia mata ngā mahuetanga, ti he Māori Hey.
Sure. Okay, so I'm about to declare the meeting closed, but first I would like to ask to Kira Toma to close us with a karakia, please.
He te māngai e ngā ānei rapono, he te tuko turi tapa. He whakauingia mai tu o tō warapono. Pai he te tia no mātou ki runga ki te rangi Māori e ngā wākato. Maono te māngai he awhana, he tautoko, he tuturu, he pūmau. A ia nei, aka nei ai. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you for that. So I'll now declare the meeting officially closed at 11:23. And I think we'll have a break for morning tea.